In a courtroom built for television but cracked open by truth, Karoline Leavitt faced the battle she never saw coming. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about survival, dignity, and the cold reality millions of Americans live every single day. Across from her sat Jasmine Crockett, armed with policies, numbers, and the chilling indifference of a system that had forgotten its soul. What began as a mock trial meant for entertainment turned into a national reckoning that left 23 million viewers stunned and forever changed. Because when the lights dimmed and the cameras rolled, it wasn't a debate they witnessed, it was the breaking and the rising of a woman who chose truth over pride. The invitation arrived dressed in dignity, but Karoline Leavitt smelled the setup. A televised empathy trial, they called it. Walk in their shoes, a live role reversal on justice and inequality. Primetime coverage, millions watching. A chance to show common humanity across political divides. Karoline had heard this song before. Still, something about the phrasing caught her. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was a quiet, stubborn hope that the country she loved could still be reached through honest storytelling. Or maybe it was the opponent they promised. Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine Crockett, the fiery progressive Congresswoman, the rising star of the left, sharp-tongued, iron-willed, and unapologetic. Karoline didn't flinch. She clicked accept. The producers outlined the terms. Karoline would embody Ellen Parker, a struggling single mother with no health insurance, fighting to keep her diabetic son alive. Jasmine Crockett would represent the government, the cold, detached bureaucracy defending policies over people. It was supposed to be performance, a social experiment, but neither woman was prepared for what would happen when the lights came up. The set was a sterile courtroom replica. 2 chairs faced each other across a polished floor. Above them, a massive screen flashed one simple, brutal word: switch. Karoline was dressed down, faded jeans, scuffed sneakers, no makeup. Jasmine Crockett, in contrast, strode onto the stage immaculate. Tailored navy suit, polished heels, an air of command radiating off her like heat. There was no opening fanfare, no smiling host to ease them in. Only a voice grave and clear, announcing, "Tonight we challenge power, privilege, and pride. Tonight we switch." The cameras rolled. Karoline sat under the glaring lights, heart pounding. The folder in her lap was heavy with fictional pain. Eviction notices, hospital bills, rejection letters from government agencies. But it wasn't fiction. It was a composite of too many real American lives stitched together into a story impossible to deny. The audience settled into silence. A silence that was not polite, it was expectant, hungry. The lights shifted, softening just enough to mimic the sterile chill of a courtroom. Karoline straightened in her chair, every inch of her body aware that this was more than a show. This was a trial. And it wasn't just Ellen Parker on trial. It was Karoline Leavitt. The moderator's voice broke the silence, steady and impersonal. "Miss Parker, state your case." Karoline inhaled deeply, and across from her, Jasmine Crockett folded her hands neatly, her face carved in stone. Ready to defend the system, ready to break her. The first words out of Karoline's mouth were almost too soft to catch. "My name is Ellen Parker. I'm a mother, and I'm asking for my son's life." The air shifted, and somewhere in the invisible space between dignity and desperation, the first crack appeared. Karoline gripped the edges of her chair, grounding herself. She reminded herself, it's just a script. But as the spotlight bore down on her, as the faces in the darkened audience leaned in, as Jasmine Crockett stared back with the cold efficiency of policy and procedure, Karoline felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Fear. Not fear of losing an argument. Fear that the woman she was pretending to be, this Ellen Parker, wasn't a performance at all. She was real. She was out there. And she had been invisible to Karoline until now. The moderator continued, "Miss Parker, can you explain why you did not complete your application for emergency Medicaid services?" Karoline licked her lips, her voice thick. "I tried," she said. "The forms, They were confusing. They sent them to my old address. I called. I begged. Across from her, Jasmine Crockett adjusted her papers with meticulous calm. Failure to maintain accurate residency documentation disqualifies applicants, Jasmine said coolly. Karoline's knuckles whitened. I didn't move because I wanted to, she said. I lost our home. The words echoed, a whisper of humanity against the mechanical efficiency of the system Jasmine represented. The moderator pressed. Miss Parker, what steps did you take to secure interim care? Karoline swallowed. I went to the church pantry. They tried. They couldn't cover the insulin. Jasmine Crockett's voice sliced clean through the tension. Nonprofits are not substitutes for structured government programs, she said. Resources must be distributed based on verified criteria. Karoline's chest tightened. It wasn't the words. It was the familiarity. She had defended these policies herself. She had argued for fiscal responsibility, limited government overreach, prioritized spending. Now seated in worn sneakers with a folder of rejection letters in her lap, the language she once championed felt like a wall she couldn't scale. The moderator's voice dropped an octave. Miss Parker, if your son's condition worsens, if he doesn't make it, what will you tell yourself? Karoline opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She blinked rapidly, her vision blurring. Across from her, Jasmine Crockett offered no comfort, only a bureaucratic diagnosis. Survival is determined by systems, Jasmine said flatly. Not sentiment. The first tear slipped from Karoline's eye. Not scripted, not rehearsed. Real. It traced a clean line down her cheek, shining under the hot studio lights. And across the country, millions watched as Karoline Leavitt, the fighter, the polished spokesperson, the symbol of unshakable resolve, broke. Not out of weakness, but out of seeing, out of finally, truly seeing. The mock trial had been designed for spectacle. Instead, it had become a reckoning, and it had only just begun. The second round of questioning started differently. The moderator's voice softened, signaling a deeper dissent. Miss Parker, walk us through what happened the night your son needed emergency care. Karoline stared down at the folder on her lap. It felt heavier now, like it held not paper, but memory. She inhaled slowly, looked up, and spoke. It was 2 a.m., she began. I woke up to him coughing, harder than I'd ever heard. He said his chest hurt, that he couldn't breathe. Across from her, Jasmine Crockett remained still, expressionless, clinical. Karoline's voice shook. I grabbed his shoes. I carried him to the neighbor's house. We don't have a car anymore. The neighbor, she tried, but her car wouldn't start. She paused, blinking fast against the sting in her eyes. So I sat with him, on the curb, holding him, rocking him, telling him it was going to be okay. The studio, so sterile moments ago, felt different now, heavier, more human. Karoline wiped her palms on her jeans. We called 911. They said, her voice caught. They said there were no ambulances available, that we should find another way to get to a hospital. The moderator let the silence settle before turning to Jasmine. Congresswoman Crockett, how do you respond to Miss Parker's experience? Jasmine's voice was crisp, impersonal. The system prioritizes the greatest good for the greatest number, she said. Unfortunately, not all needs can be accommodated immediately. Karoline flinched visibly. He's a little boy, she said, her voice hoarse. She stopped herself. This wasn't a debate. This was grief. And Jasmine Crockett, polished, prepared, and unyielding, stared back without a flicker of remorse. The moderator pressed on. Miss Parker, after being denied emergency transportation, what did you do? Karoline's jaw tightened. We waited. We waited for sunrise. Then I called every clinic I could. Her hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm she fought to maintain. But, she added, they all said the same thing. No insurance, no appointment, no service. She squeezed her eyes shut for half a second, gathering herself. I couldn't even get him checked. I couldn't even get him seen. The moderator's tone hardened. Congresswoman Crockett, Miss Parker's son needed life-saving medication. Isn't the system supposed to protect the vulnerable? Jasmine didn't blink. The system must function without emotional bias, she said. Policy must be consistent to ensure fairness. Caroline's head snapped up. Fairness, she echoed, voice cracking. Is it fair to tell a mother to bury her child because the paperwork didn't check out? The audience inhaled collectively, a breath they didn't realize they had been holding. Jasmine's voice remained level. Tragedy does not excuse deviation from protocol. It was the most devastating sentence Karoline had ever heard. Not because it was loud, but because it was said so quietly, so efficiently, so devoid of soul. Karoline stared across the polished table. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the speaker, the fighter, the politician. She was the mother, the desperate woman outside a system that never intended to catch her. The moderator's final question for the round was simple, but brutal. Miss Parker, if you had a chance to say one thing to the people running this system, what would you say? Karoline swallowed. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She looked Jasmine Crockett dead in the eye. I would say, stop making us beg to be seen. Her voice cracked completely on the last word. And millions across America felt it crack something inside themselves too. The stage was silent. No applause. No debate. Just the raw sound of a heart breaking. The cameras zoomed in on Karoline's face, catching the tears she no longer tried to hide. And across from her, Jasmine Crockett's expression didn't soften. Not even a little. The system wasn't designed to weep, and tonight neither would she. But Karoline had, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't ashamed. She was awake. The next segment began with a slow, deliberate shift. The moderator turned the questioning toward Karoline, but this time, it wasn't about paperwork. It was about belief. Miss Parker, he asked, before today, how did you view people who struggled to navigate government systems? Karoline's breath hitched. The expected answer was scripted in her mind. Words like sympathy, understanding, commitment to reform. But something deeper rose in her chest. Something raw. Something real. I thought they weren't trying hard enough, she said. The words hung in the air like smoke. I thought, Karoline continued, her voice barely above a whisper, that if you worked hard, you wouldn't need help. That if you needed help, it was your fault. A ripple moved through the audience. Not judgment, not scorn, but something closer to collective recognition. Jasmine Crockett didn't move, didn't gloat. She simply watched, arms crossed neatly, as Karoline unraveled her own mythologies. The moderator pressed. And now? Karoline blinked, a tear slipping free. Now, she repeated. She shook her head slowly, the motion heavy with disbelief at her own blindness. Now I know you can do everything right and still lose. The words weren't theatrical. They were confession. The screen behind them lit up with silent projections of real headlines. Mother denied insulin. Son dies. Family evicted during pandemic. Veteran freezes to death after benefits cut. Karoline turned slightly, catching sight of the images. Her hands fumbled uselessly in her lap, searching for composure that simply wasn't there anymore. The moderator leaned toward Jasmine Crockett. Congresswoman, do these outcomes reflect a functioning system? Jasmine's reply was measured, even mechanical. Anomalies are inevitable in any structure designed for scale, she said. The goal must always be optimization, not perfection. Karoline stared at her, not in anger, not even in disbelief, but in sorrow. How did we get here? She whispered, the words not directed at anyone, yet heard by everyone. The moderator shifted. Miss Parker, if you could redesign the system, what would you change first? Karoline swallowed hard. She looked up at Jasmine, the woman she had once debated across television screens, the policies she had once defended from podiums, and she spoke with a voice stripped of polish. I'd start by remembering, she said, that behind every application, every denied claim, every rejected call, there's a name, a face, a child. The cameras caught the wet shimmer in her eyes. Not weakness, not a stumble. Truth. Unvarnished, unshielded truth. Jasmine's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only crack in her armor. But she said nothing, because some walls are built not just around institutions, but around hearts. And tonight, Karoline had shattered her own, for everyone to see. The moderator's next question was almost gentle. Miss Parker, what would you ask of this system if you could ask only one thing? Karoline exhaled slowly, her body sinking deeper into the hard courtroom chair. The lights overhead buzzed faintly. The audience's silence pressed heavier than any spotlight. She looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly, and then across the room, across the miles of invisible space between her and Jasmine Crockett. Her voice cracked but did not falter. I would ask it to remember we're not numbers. She paused, blinking against a fresh wave of tears. We're not case files. We're mothers, fathers, children. We are the people you said you would serve. Across from her, Jasmine remained motionless, impenetrable. The moderator shifted awkwardly, sensing the air thicken. Karoline pressed on, words tumbling faster now, from a place too deep to fake. We're the ones waiting on hold for hours, begging for someone to answer. We're the ones filling out forms we can't understand. The ones being told to wait, to be patient, to be grateful for crumbs when we are starving. Her hands gripped the sides of her chair, the pressure whitening her knuckles. We do everything right, she said. We work, we pray, we believe. Her eyes locked on Jasmine. And still, Karoline whispered, we're invisible. A murmur stirred in the audience. People shifted in their seats. A cough, a sniffle. Someone stifled a sob. The moderator turned to Jasmine. Congresswoman Crockett, would you like to respond? Jasmine's voice remained unwavering, a razor honed by policy. Compassion must be balanced against sustainability. The sentence fell like a hammer. Karoline sagged. Something inside her broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, irrevocably. Her breathing changed, quicker, shallower. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to calm the racing beat of a heart that felt too full, too burdened to keep carrying the weight. The moderator noticed. Miss Parker, are you all right? Karoline opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came. Instead, she swayed. The folder of documents, the eviction notices, the denial letters, slipped from her lap and scattered across the polished floor. Papers fluttered around her like falling leaves. The room froze. The cameras zoomed in instinctively. Jasmine Crockett's expression faltered, the first real crack in her composure. Karoline blinked hard, her vision swimming. She reached for the table to steady herself, but missed. A low gasp rippled through the studio as Karoline slumped forward, catching herself awkwardly on the edge of the table. Producers scrambled from the wings. The moderator stood halfway, uncertain whether to intervene or maintain the fiction of impartiality. But fiction had already fled the room. Karoline's collapse wasn't a headline. It was a reckoning. A medic appeared at her side, checking her pulse, whispering calm reassurances. The audience, bound by unspoken agreement to silence, sat frozen, watching a moment that would be replayed for years. The screen overhead flashed briefly, a technical error, then went black. The cameras kept rolling. The nation kept watching. Jasmine Crockett sat back in her chair, hands folded tightly in her lap, her face unreadable. Karoline was lifted gently onto a stretcher, the gold cross around her neck glinting in the light as she was wheeled away. No closing arguments, no applause, just the heavy, suffocating truth. When the system forgets the people it was built to serve, it doesn't just fail, it crushes. And tonight, America had watched it happen in real time. Morning broke over America, but something in the air was different. The footage of Karoline Leavitt's collapse exploded across every screen, every phone, every conversation. No spin doctor could soften it. No talking head could fully explain it. For a moment, the nation simply watched. Some cried, some scoffed, but no one looked away. Headlines raced to frame the moment. Truth breaks through. Leavitt collapses in empathy trial. The night America faced itself. When a conservative finally saw the system she defended. In living rooms, coffee shops, veterans halls, and small-town churches, people talked. Not about politics, about dignity, about humanity. Karoline stayed silent. From her hospital bed, she refused interviews, refused PR teams desperate to control the narrative, refused even her own instincts to explain, to defend, to package pain into sound bites. Instead, she listened to the thousands of letters that poured in, to the veterans who wrote, "I've been that forgotten name," to the single mothers who said, "You saw us," to the elderly who whispered, "We knew." We just didn't have the words. And somewhere deep in her heart, she understood. This wasn't about rescuing her reputation. It was about finally rescuing her soul. 3 days after the collapse, Karoline appeared quietly, not on a network stage, but at a local church service. No cameras, no advisors, just her and a battered congregation that had buried too many hopes too soon. She stood before them, still pale, still visibly shaken, and said simply, "I didn't fall because I was weak. I fell because I carried blindness too long, and it finally broke me." Silence. Then the pastor, a man who had watched 2 sons lost to a broken system, rose to his feet. He didn't clap. He simply nodded. And one by one, the congregation followed. Not applause, acknowledgement, a new beginning. Karoline Leavitt's collapse didn't end a career. It ignited a calling. She returned to Washington, not as a politician desperate for re-election, but as a woman unwilling to unsee what she now knew. She fought for healthcare reform, for veteran care, for the invisible, not because it was popular, but because once your heart has been broken open by truth, it can never be closed again. And across America, people remembered, not the moment she fell, but the courage it took to finally stand. Because in a time when pride roared loudest, it was a single whispered truth that changed everything. We are not numbers. We are not case files. We are Americans. And Karoline Leavitt, broken and rebuilt by truth, would never forget that again.